Straight off from the outside, this little Honda Coupe has all the right angles to get car fans excited. But to the unwitting man on the street, it might not be so obvious that the CRZ is actually a hybrid. The sharp exterior looks are aided by a rather funky dash that reveals the lurking technology. Most importantly though, the CRZ is supposedly the first hybrid that's going to be fun to drive.
I think one of the biggest surprises I've had with the CRZ is that when I first had a brief go in one about a year ago, I thought, this is a great handling car, great steering, great gearbox. Why have they bothered with this hybrid system? They should have stuck a screaming VTEC in it and it would have been much more fun. But actually, having spent the week with it, it's sort of the hybrid sort of adds to the character of the car, and it actually makes it sort of quite a sort of gadgety type car. And I think that's the sort of person that would actually go well with this car. Someone that's into their gadgets and someone that ultimately actually enjoys their driving. But nowadays petrol and insurance and tax are blooming expensive, and on things like this the insurance isn't particularly bad. You've got free road tax, and even when you're sort of thrashing it, you're still getting 40 miles per gallon. And for driving enthusiasts nowadays to actually get something like that out of a car is pretty impressive. One of the things I always find with good sports cars is that they have a good tactile feeling, and the CRZ's got a great amount of feeling through the steering wheel. It just feels good, but also the gearbox is one of the best things this side of an MX-5. It's very tight, it's very precise, and it means that you can really enjoy driving the CRZ, and it's not like one of these crappy CVT gearboxes that you get in a lot of other hybrids. In the car, we've got 3 different modes that you can play with, depending on, I suppose, how you're feeling. So you've got economy mode, and in this mode, the mapping is quite dull. It sort of dulls the performance. The throttle mapping is changed so that it's sort of quite lethargic, basically. But it's great if you're just wanting to do some city driving, and also the steering lightens up a bit. You've then got normal mode. The map changes again, so it feels like we've got a bit more power. The throttle pedal is now a bit more woken up, a bit less lethargic. And yeah, I suppose you could just use this for normal day-to-day driving when you haven't got your complete economy head on. Then when you really want to have fun with the CRZ, which I think is what this car was made for really, you put it into sport mode, and the throttle map changes again. And now it's much more sharper. You can feel it really feels quite a lot more alive when you're driving it. And the steering changes as well. It gets a bit weightier. It feels, although the steering's good, the sort of added weight that you get with sport mode does perhaps feel a little artificial, but it's a really good car to drive in sport mode nonetheless. It makes it a proper sports car. With the dash, there's a lot going on, but once you're sort of used to it, you don't really have to make reference to it that much. Basically, on the left hand side we've got the battery indicator, which tells you how much battery power you've got, and there's a charge and assist feature as well. And when it goes into the charge, into the green area, that's basically when it's charging the battery and it's not using any of the battery's power. When you then want to put your foot down and utilise some of that power that's been stored up in the battery, it then goes into the blue area, which is the assist mode, which is when the motor is kicking in and helping the petrol engine. So that's sort of what's going on the left side of the dials. On the right side of the dials, just below the fuel gauge and stuff, we've got varying different modes. So it sort of goes 3 miles per gallon and all the usual stuff. But then you've got this sort of quite unique feature within this eco section, and you've basically got this white bar, and it goes between the left and the right, and if it goes left then you're being good, if it goes right then you're kind of sort of being bad. And then on top of this, as even more of a visual representation, it's got some imaginary electronic trees which grow leaves if you're being good. So you won't see too many leaves if you're hammering it in sports mode, basically. In the centre of the dash, where you've got the rev counter and the speedo, we've got some varying sort of colours going on. So you've got a nice blue glow around the outside, but then there's kind of an orb around the speedo. And that changes colour depending on how you're driving. So if you're being good, or if you're being economical rather, then it's green and it glows a sort of greenish colour. As you start to be bad or good, depending on how you look at it, basically when you put your foot down, it turns a sort of bluish colour. And then when you're in sport mode, it turns red. And I have noticed most of the time I've been driving it, it has been glowing red. But that's when it's the most fun. I did have a minor incident with one of the safety systems the other day, which was the trash control. As I was pulling out of a junction in the wet, it decided to just kill all of the power, which then sort of left me in the middle of the road with a big truck coming towards me. So I went home, changed my underpants, and decided to leave the traction control off in future. As with a lot of modern cars that have got any sort of sport associated with them, it does feel pretty jiggly. I mean, I don't know why there's this obsession with just hard suspension. I mean, it's just not necessary. I mean, you drive stuff from Renault Sport and it's, you know, it manages to be absolutely fantastic, while relatively, unless you're sort of going for cup versions, you know, they're not particularly harsh to drive. Whereas this and a lot of other cars nowadays are just a bit jiggly, and it's just a bit irritating. One of the highlights for me with the CRZ is the handling. You're just kind of sticking it into a corner and just wondering when it's actually going to run out of grip, and it hasn't yet. And it's just so much fun. It feels actually, despite the sort of heavy batteries, the car itself actually feels sort of quite nimble on its feet, and it's almost like a sort of small hot hatch in the sort of way that the Suzuki Swift Sport is. It's that sort of revvy, you know, it wants to go faster, and that's when it really actually rewards you. The main thing with the CRZ is figuring out what sort of person would buy one. I mean, although I like it, you kind of look at stuff like the Scirocco and you think, price-wise, there's not a lot in it. It's got a hell of a lot more practicality. I mean, I got in the back of this thing earlier, which I can show you. Wasn't a pretty sight. Something like the Scirocco is going to have a better boot. You've got seats that you can use. And if you're going for something like a diesel, although it would be equivalent, a bit more expensive than this, you might even be looking at getting similar miles per gallon. But I think with the CRZ, where it might appeal more to someone is the sort of gadget side of things. It is quite gadgety, and I do actually find that quite entertaining, sadly. But I also find that the car is actually, it feels a little bit more nimble, a little bit more agile than something like the Scirocco. And so I think from the sort of driving enthusiast point of view, I actually prefer the CRZ, and I actually think it's going to be one of these cars that in sort of 10 years' time we'll be looking back and sort of thinking, oh, they were great, they were. You know, they were good fun car to drive, and as hybrid systems get more developed, and you know, with stuff like what Porsche's been doing and things like that, as it becomes less about perhaps eco and more about how petrol and electricity can work together, I think this will be seen as sort of one of the starting points of that, as from an enthusiast point of view, as hybrid systems become something to enjoy rather than something that's just a bit of an irritant, really.